guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So as you can tell based on the title, today we're going to talk about the ROW's Cruise 2024 collection. Trying to find images or really moving images of the ROW is so hard. Yes, you can go on Vogue. Sometimes I want to get a feeling of what the show is. Sometimes when you see a runway show, I want to watch a YSL show. YSL is going to post a video online, they're going to post it live on social media. There's going to be like all this marketing around this, or Chanel or whatever brand is going to heavily market their shows. The ROW is not like this. It is so under the radar. They don't have a website where they show videos of their runway collections. They don't have a YouTube page. When you go into their Instagram, they don't even advertise. But what the ROW has been using, at least Instagram for, which for me has been very interesting actually, has been sort of mood boards. So you kind of get a sense of their inspirations, what potentially is their thinking behind some of their works. They'll post artists, designers, furniture, architecture, music. So it's very interesting to go onto that page. And that's honestly how I did my video on the ROW and Le Corbusier. They kept on posting images of Le Corbusier's work and I was like, wow, they're heavily inspired by this architect. If I'm gonna be honest, this video, it's not as like cohesive, it's not as listicle. We're just gonna take a look at what's inspiring the ROW, seeing how that is translated on the runway. It's less structured, but I did want to talk about specifically color. I specifically wanted to talk about form, and I wanted to talk about potential themes. First, look at color, guys. Now, whenever I think of color, honestly, I do not think of the ROW. Frankly, the ROW is not a very colorful brand. They might use a few colors here and there in every collection, but it is very largely neutrals, and they're very heavy on the neutrals. They're actually just very heavy on the black, and they might include some neutrals, but the ROW is very much a brand that does a lot of black, and I think that's just a reflection of their personal style. What the ROW is, it's a response to how the Olsen twins want to dress, and they want to create collections around how they dress. If we're just gonna put things in like the most simplest terms here. When we look at the first few looks, we see a lot of black, and then we see black and white, and then we see kind of this neutral tone here, and then we see more black, and then we're seeing pops of color come through, right? We're gonna see like a pop of a glove and a bright color. We're gonna see tones of neutrals and colors. We're gonna see different types of neutrals. We're gonna see maybe a green with sort of like more muted, faded, neutral versions of that same color. We're going to see a bright red at different intensities, and we're gonna see gray. We're seeing a lot of neutrals, but little pops of color. I don't even really want to say pops of color, I want to say more so interaction of color. The ROW recently on their Instagram, they posted this image. It is by this artist Joseph Albers, Study for EK-IF 1970. Joseph Albers was an artist very interested in color. He's very interested, specifically the relationship with color. He had his own theory of color, and of course these are theories, right? These are not laws, these are not rules, these are not universal truths, these are just theories of color. He wrote a book called The Interaction of Color. A lot of his work, as we see here, like these squares of colors and how they interact with each other. Color is always talked about in either like a very singular way. It's like, I really like this color pink, I really like this color blue, I really like this color green, I like this color orange, whatever your favorite color is. It's talked about in this singular way, but we're never like, I really like how blue interacts with green. I like how pink interacts with orange, or whatever it is. But that's what Joseph Albers is all about, the interaction of color, the relationship that it has with other colors. Because to him, color is something that is extremely observational. We create our own associations with color. For him, in visual perception, a color is almost never seen as it really is, as it physically is. This fact makes color the most relative medium in art. There are people that will say, oh, this is what color is, right? Like we can look at and say, you know, this is the scientific characteristics of what the color red is, but you're not really gonna know what the color red is until you experience it. And even just red itself has so many different meanings. Red could mean love, but it could also mean anger, it could mean passion. Color is something that is relative for Joseph Albers. What's interesting about Joseph Albers was he was not someone that was interested in creating color harmonies, following color theory. Yes, we can look at color wheel, primary colors, the secondary colors, the tertiary colors. We can look at complementary colors, we can look at split complementary colors. We can learn about the theories of color, and that will help us understand what the colors are, how to mix colors. It's helpful in that sense, right? For him, okay, yes, now that we know what colors are, how can we interact with these colors? It's not about creating a conclusion, more so it's about about an observation. We can make this exact same analogy when we talk about something like music, right? We can learn music theory, we can learn notes on the scale, we can learn what this sound makes. Until we actually experience music like hands-on, theory can only teach us so much. Because you're experiencing and playing with music or playing with color, you develop certain sensitivities to color. So when I look at this collection, obviously the ROW has had a long history of being very black, but I do feel more so in this collection, and I know they've had other collections where they've experimented with color, some of these combinations, these outfit combinations, when we look at specifically even just this olive leather coat and this beige clutch and this sort of deep forest green glove, there's a lot of interaction of color going on here, right? It's very cohesive, it's very neutral, it's very harmonious, but there's a lot of interaction going on here. When we look at even just this pure neutral outfit, right? How are these neutrals interacting? We've got this sort of taupey gray, we've got sort of this brown color, and then the brown, I don't know. Our perception of color sort of changes when colors are placed next to each other. And then we have this white shirt underneath. Finally, this red coat, vivid red gloves, like these vivid red opera gloves, and then we have these neutral shoes, but then we have this black clutch, something along those lines. The way the Olsen twins are looking at color is very much the same way Joseph Albers is looking at color. So now let's talk about another image they recently referenced right before that Joseph Albers painting. So this is René Lalique, preliminary drawing for an Egyptian pendant, beetle with wings spread, 1898. So let's kind of talk about form for a second here. When I saw a lot of the forms here, they were not very geometric shapes. Like the forms felt very organic, they felt very natural. Yes, we're doing a lot of suits here. There's a little bit more structure and construction that is involved in a suit. Coats with these lapels. There's still structure, but there's still something a little bit more organic feeling about a lot of these coats, about the way the clothing is draped. We're allowing for like organic shapes, almost like the vulnerability of form, right? Like these are not rigid shapes. They allow for like greater flow on the body. When we just think of a brand like YSL, right? The recent collection at YSL, we had these women with these really strong, powerful shoulders. The ROW will still do an oversized shoulder. Interestingly enough, we did see some of the shoulders did extend, almost like wings though, right? There's this bat-like quality, but in an organic way, not in like a man-made way, not like in a robotic way. These shoulders look a little bit more like wings here. Interestingly enough, during the show, they were playing Bela Lugosi's Dead, which is a song from Bauhaus, which is like this 80s goth band. Let me know what you think that means. And to me, just a lot of beautiful drapery, how clothing folds, falls over the body. So back to this image though. René Lalique was a jeweler, glass designer. He created glass art, perfume bottles, vases in this very Art Nouveau way, almost like this very naturalistic way, right? Art Nouveau was this like style of art, turn of the century, turn of the 20th century, we saw became very, very popular, very organic, but in an illustrational kind of way. The popular style that we would see in the realm of design. To me, this was not an artist I would typically expect the ROW to reference, but I was recently reading an article and I wish I saved the quote because I'm totally gonna butcher the quote. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen were talking about how a lot of their collections, they're very seemingly very like minimalistic. It's not like Dolce & Gabbana or like Chanel or, you know, like anything really like fancy and like illustrative or anything like that, right? Like we don't get that from the ROW. But they've stated that sometimes they'll take inspiration from things that are very complex, but they'll really try to like pare it down in a way that feels right for them. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really see a whole lot of Art Nouveau when I look at this, but I can totally see looking at nature and sort of even just looking at like wings and like the shoulders and sort of extending the shoulders, looking at how we can make clothing like that. I can definitely see that. When I look at some of these coats with these very extravagant folds, there's something about them that almost feels they're looking at the bases of flowers, like not the top of flowers, but if you look at flowers and kind of like where the petals emerge, it's more so like the base or like the root of the flower. So I don't know the anatomy of a flower. Some of these look very just like organic shapes like that. I thought that was a little bit more unusual. When I see a Joseph Albers painting, I'm like, oh yeah, that totally see the ROW being inspired by abstract minimalist art. art. Art Nouveau, not so much, but knowing that they can take inspiration from things that are a little bit more complex, ornate, and try to pare it down, it makes sense to me now. And just to talk about handbags, one thing I'm noticing with just in terms of like the shape, a lot of these handbags, they're carried like this. It's not like they're, you know, carried like this in a very like structured way. They're worn in sort of this way that conforms to the shape of the body, that flows to the shape of the body. I think this is very interesting that they were using the Margot bag as opposed to the Sophia bag, which is a little bit more structured. It's something that just flows to the body, that like shapes to the body, that feels a little bit more organic against the body. Not so geometric, not so hard line, not so mechanical, a little bit more natural, a little bit more taking inspiration from nature here. And then finally, they posted this image from this French architect, furniture designer, Pierre Chereau. Mirror triptych éclairant, totally butchering that, okay, like I'm not even gonna try. 1930. So Pierre Chereau was really known for one incredible building. It is one of the most like quintessential works of modern architecture, the Maison de Verre, or the House of Glass. So he used a lot of glass mirrors. What makes this building so modern was obviously the use of materials, like the application of materials, but also the meaning behind it and how it was very customized for this specific client. It was designed for Dr. Jean d'Alsace, commissioned really by his wife, and he was a gynecologist, a promoter of contraception, family planning. I don't really know how much more I need to really talk about this on YouTube, so I'll just leave it at that. The design of the home is supposed to be inspired by this man as a gynecologist. So the facade is made of glass bricks and the house was designed as a box of light. This was a very modern approach for design. If you think about this, early 20th century, stuff like this was not being made. These glass bricks, there's something very industrial, very utilitarian in this kind of like cold industrial way. It makes me think of something that is brutalist, but it's not very brutalist because the material is very light. Eventually, this house was a place where famous artists, philosophers, poets would congregate. So it was very much this place where a lot of modern thinkers in Paris would actually gather eventually. But the interior of the home was also very industrial looking. There was a lot of exposed materials, metal doors, exposed pipes, industrial lighting. From the outside of the house, the facade, this is a quote from Kinfolk magazine. The effect is a house that feels like it is alive and changing constantly, with the movement of walls and parts of light and of people through it. It is the closest we might get to experiencing life inside of a Cubist painting. There are themes of like lightness, intimacy, movement, but like privacy. And when I look at this collection of the ROW, I think the same kind of feelings that we get from a Pierre Chereau building is pretty much the same kind of feelings that we're getting when we were looking at this collection. Something a little bit more reserved, still light. We can look at some of their clothing, and because it's like a winter coat, it's gonna be weighted. There's gonna be a little bit more weight, but there's still this movability, this idea of movement. Whenever we look at a collection from the ROW, this collection or any collection onward, this idea of movement is very at the front of a lot of their works. The women are never in stilettos that are impossible to walk in. They're always in comfortable shoes, or even if they're in heels, they're heels that are very walkable. While they don't show a lot of skin, like if anything, you might see a calf. You might see shoulders. You might see arms and shoulders, but that's kind of the extent of the ROW. Like you're not seeing side boob or cut out, you know, nipples or anything. You're not seeing any of that with the ROW. Very conservative. And I think this is truly just how straight up like the Olsen twins dress. Like this is how Mary-Kate and Ashley dress. And I think that's just their search for privacy, their search for intimacy, like their whole lives. They've been in the eye of the paparazzi their whole lives. They are still being photographed by paparazzis. When I'm looking at collections from the ROW, it's the articles I'm finding. Yes, I'll find like Vogue articles and other fashion magazines, but I'm still seeing like People magazine or whatever, like tabloids, taking pictures. So yeah, that's my video. I don't really have a specific artist or theme. We're not looking at like the theories of Clement Greenberg. We're not doing that. It's just literally looking at some of their inspirations and how this plays into this collection. This collection is very much in keeping with the ROW. I do feel we're seeing, I don't know, maybe it's just me, I felt like there's a lot of experimentation with form here, especially in like the areas of coats with like draping. This idea of draping has been something I think the ROW has been leaning more towards in like more of an organic sense. What's very interesting to me though is how the ROW has become very much talked about recently. People are saying the ROW is a brand that is is recession-core or something like that. It's something that you can buy for the recession. Very an interesting sort of framing to me, because when you look at these price points, I don't really think people suffering in the recession are going to be buying this stuff. When I think of the brand the ROW has always done this. Like, the ROW has done clothing, this very minimalistic stance. I'll just throw up some images and like from what years these collections are from. The Olsen twins have always been interested in this. Yes, they've had periods where they've gone through like boho, grungy phases. I really think late 2000s, the core of like their personal style has always been there. But just on this topic of recession core, brands are trying to not have logos. Like even Balenciaga clothing didn't have t-shirts with logos or hoodies with logos or whatever. Prada, which is a very interesting brand to me, because Prada is always a brand. I don't want to say the word trendy, because I feel when I say the word trendy, it's very like derogatory. They're very interested in the now. And even like Raf Simons himself, he's very like a modernist. I think Musha Prada and I think even Raf Simons are interested in what's now. They think in like a very forward way, you know, not holding on to the past really. Their most recent collection for Prada was about taking care. It was about sort of looking at clothing that like nurses wore, clothing that was a little bit more utilitarian, more like workwear. To me, that sort of seems more recession core, because they're perhaps trying to like look at society from this like political perspective. I don't think the ROW is trying to say like, okay, now we're in a recession, we're gonna give you like minimalist vibes. Like, this is what they've always done, even in wake of logo mania, even in wake of like, crystal feathers, sequins, all that. Sure, maybe the ROW did have some pieces that may had a little bit more intricacy. Like, I think when you talk to anyone that likes the ROW, or even just this aesthetic in general, it's not about like, trends. When you read these articles that are like, I want to hop on the recession core trend, buy the ROW. It's a really expensive brand to just buy as a trend. Maybe you do, maybe you buy the ROW as a trend, but you're gonna find that piece is probably a piece that you're gonna wear like very frequently, and it's gonna be like a great wardrobe building piece. I don't think it's a brand that you want to spend $3,000 on a sweater because it makes you feel like you're following a trend. I don't know, like that's just my thinking. What do you guys think? Also, there are people that are saying that there are people that are interested in buying higher quality things, and I think if that's the case, I can totally see that. If you're interested in buying something that's, you know, not going to fall apart, that's going to last a little bit longer, you're tired of things that make you feel itchy, sure, like check out the ROW. I don't think anyone watching my videos are like, oh, I want to try this recession core trend. I don't think so. But yeah, if you're in the camp, if you're looking for higher quality things, then yes, that's a different story. When I think about brands like the ROW or Old Celine, or even when I look at some of the collections by Hermes, like the creative director from Hermes came from the ROW. You don't buy any of these brands because they're on trend. Like, yeah, I'm sure there's some people that buy Birkins because it's trending, right? If you're buying, you know, a runway piece or a sweater from Hermes, maybe you're buying it because like you're doing your spending or whatever you gotta do. But I'm sure you're gonna realize that that's like actually a really wardrobe building piece, and I think maybe you might come to that realization. None of these brands are about following trends. That's like a nice thing, like it's very anti-trend. That's kind of the joy about buying brands like this. Like, it's not about the trend. It's not about trying to chase something. It's not about letting FOMO get to you. It's just about you being able to wear clothing that makes you feel good and comfortable, but confident at the same time. It's not about being able to like capture what the moment is, but then like discarding it. You're buying something that is a forever timeless piece. That's my video. Would love to know your thoughts. Is there anything that really stood out to you in this collection? I would love to know, and thank you so much for joining me in another video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.